policy of the Los Angeles City Council. Let us start, as is our custom, by sitting the hell down. Everybody take a seat, please.
He asked me, but I only know about Chris.
Mr. Sergeant at Arms, could you do your very popular and effective shh?
Could we be quiet, folks? If you're about to start, find a seat if you don't mind, please. If you want to talk, take it outside.
Thank you very much. As I said, very effective. Again, welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of June 11, 2014. I'm Councilman Mike Bond, I'm the chair. I am joined by my colleagues, my colleague, Mr. Parks. We're expecting a few of my other colleagues shortly. We have a very big agenda today, which I am told is due to the fact that we have council recess coming up and a lot of stuff to move. I personally think it's because Paul Backstrom went on vacation, and so I'm blaming him for the lengthy agenda today. So we're going to try to move through things rather quickly. I am going to start. We have one general public comment card, and I'm going to get that out of the way now. Ms. Antonia Ramirez. 1 minute on the clock, please.
I thought it was 2 minutes.
1 minute today.
Because I'm here, right? I'd like to...
Your time is running right now. Please start the clock.
Not only do you regulate speech, but you obviously don't exercise any sense of objectivity. Now, whatever my world of speech is, it is mine, and I own up to it. Now, if you want to be a racist or you want to sit here and regulate my speech, then you have no business here as a public servant, okay? You obviously don't have the Constitution for being a public servant. So I would ask the people to recall you, because again, you do not exercise your rights as a public servant for the people, to the people, and every other preposition that you'd like to stick in there, okay? As a law-abiding citizen, I don't come here to beg you for time. I come here with the good faith intention of speaking my mind, because I ride the buses. Do you ride the buses? I don't talk out of my ass like you do, okay? I actually have lived it in flesh and bone. Okay? So if it bothers you that I come here to talk to this meeting, that's exactly what I tend to do. I am a legal, law-abiding American citizen.
Thank you very much.
Not a wetback.
It's a pleasure to hear from you as always.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Click. All right, we are going to move to the agenda. I think in the interest of time, Mr. Muckery, we're going to waive our GM's verbal report today. You okay with that? I thought so. Okay, item number 7. I want to do items number 7 and 9 first, because I think we can move those rather quickly with just some technical corrections on the consent agenda. Is that correct?
Right. Item number 7 is a DOT report relative to an MOA with City of Pasadena to provide traffic control services for various events. We have a revised MOA that has been submitted to the clerk, so we would request that you would approve the item as amended.
And we now have Mr. Krikorian here. So any objections to moving item number 7 as amended? So moved.
And then item number 9 is a Koretz-Blumenfield resolution relative to amending preferential parking district number 6. We have a revised resolution for that just changes the restrictions. So we would ask that you would approve that resolution as amended.
Sounds good to me. Any objection?
No.
Okay, item 9 is also adopted. Let us try to get through some of the quicker items first, and we will do item number 6, Mr. Weezar's motion.
Item number 6 is a Weezar-Cedillo motion instructing BOE in conjunction with the Department of City Planning and DOT to prioritize implementation of the in-channel downtown Los Angeles River Bike Plan.
And we have one speaker card, which is Mr. Tanner Blackman from CD 14.
Good afternoon, council members. Mostly here just to sort of offer any background you might need if you have any questions on the motion. In a nutshell, this motion came together in coordination with the Bureau of Engineering's River team. and the Bureau of Engineering's 6th Street Bridge design team was kind of the exodus of why we felt this was necessary to put forward. There is a crucial decision that needs to be made on the design of the 6th Street Bridge about how to access under the 6th Street Bridge to what we're calling the River Gateway, whether we design the bridge to accommodate a future in-channel bike path or an at-bank bike path. And our office had done some sort of outreach efforts with both the Los Angeles River Revitalization Corporation, who has a representative here, and FOLAR. One of the board members from FOLAR had paid for some initial design and engineering work to see if the feasibility of an in-river bike channel path. We've had some initial discussions with other, relevant public agencies, and are kind of, in terms of prioritizing, we wouldn't be really deprioritizing any other part of the bicycle plan or the build out of the bicycle plan. It's really sort of a question between, do we pursue an at-bank above the channel or an in-channel river bike path? There seems to be consensus from the sort of advocacy groups and other agencies to pursue the in-channel approach, and this motion would just authorize BOE to pursue that approach. I am here for any further questions if you have. Thank you.
And we just got another public comment card from Maria Camacho of the LA River Corporation. Tanner, why don't you stay up?
Thank you. My name is Maria Camacho. I'm with the LA River Corporation. I'm here to express my support for the motion that was just described by Tanner to authorize and instruct BOE to work with the city's agencies and departments, the county and the Army Corps, and partner with Metro on efforts to prioritize the implementation of this in-channel bike path. The River Corp was created by the city through its 2007 master plan. And so we feel that this is an important gap filler as an interim solution to connecting all 51 miles of the river. So I'll keep it short.
Thank you very much. Just a couple questions for Tanner, but feel free to chime in if you'd like. Just wondering why an in-channel bike path instead of one at the top of the riverbank or the flood control channel?
Okay, so as I'm sure you're well aware, the current river bike path ends around Los Feliz, Frogtown area, and then to going south from there, there is no more bike path until you're out of the border of the city of LA. It's long been a goal since, I think even before the long-range master plan, but definitely in the river master plan to connect that somehow. Because the Army Corps of Engineers in the past had some concerns about doing an in-channel bike path, we really didn't know which way to go. It seems from discussions that have occurred with the Army Corps of Engineers lately, they're more inclined to entertain the idea. And frankly, because of the ownership along the river, predominantly railroads that own through that section of downtown, it would be hard to acquire the property along the bank itself in order to put the bike channel there, and this seems to be the most fruitful approach.
It seems like the city lacks some of the authority to design an environmentally clear and construct the project. Are the other agencies that have been identified in this motion amenable to partnering and doing the work?
Certainly, there have been, I guess I don't want to let cats out of the bag, but there's been a lot of very fruitful conversations with the Metro on the possibility of them funding a feasibility analysis, and like I said, ongoing just communications thus far with the Army Corps of Engineers, who would actually have to make the call to allow it or not.
And how much is it expected to cost?
That's part of what I think we want to get out of a feasibility analysis.
Okay. So from everything I've heard, it sounds like a really good project and one that I think a lot of people are enthusiastic about. The one issue I had with the motion, and I think it's been communicated, was the use of the term prioritize. I don't want this to leapfrog anything else. Right. So I was going to suggest that we just strike the words to prioritize implementation and just work to implement.
Works for us.
That's okay with you guys?
Absolutely.
Right. Mr. Ferrari? Any questions? Nope. Mr. Parks? Okay.
Thank you.
With that change, we will move it forward to council. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 8. I forgot to do the multimodal roll call. So let me start as we are me pause and do what we were accustomed to do at the beginning. Since the last T committee meeting, which has been a few weeks now, who has commuted to work by mass transit? How about by bicycle? Very good. I saw Mr. Labange did the Gay Pride Parade by bicycle the other day, so shout out to him, even though he's not quite here yet. Anybody by Segway? Okay, well, we're going to make this slightly more difficult in just a few minutes, I hope, at least on the Oceanfront Walk Boardwalk. And by foot, pedestrians. No surprise to see you raise your hand. Okay, thanks, everybody. So, item number 8.
Item number 8 is a city attorney report and ordinance amending subsection O of section 63.44 of the Municipal Code to include electric personal assistive mobility devices as well as hybrids and others on a limited stretch of beachlands or beach properties.
Thank you, colleagues. I actually submitted this motion at the request of the Los Angeles Police Department. As many of you know, I spend an inordinate amount of time dealing with some of the issues that we have at Venice Beach, being simultaneously a neighborhood, a business district, a tourist attraction, and one of the city's biggest and most popular parks. And Oceanfront Walk is a predominantly pedestrian walkway that gets extremely crowded, and LAPD has asked that we restrict or ban the use of segways on that busy pedestrian walkway, and they did so as a result of a number of accidents and incursions that have happened. So which is why we put the motion in. I did want to ask a clarifying question of City Attorney. A previous version of the ordinance that I saw, which I understand is being updated, indicated that they would also be banned on the beach bike path, and I wanted to be sure that we were not banning on the beach bike path because a lot of people use segways as a form of commuting on the west side, and the bike path is one means by which they do that, and I certainly don't want to impede an environmentally friendly way of getting to and from work.
Per your instructions, the Office of City Attorney has redrafted and added a provision in Section 2 of O to state that a person may operate an electric personal assisted mobility device on a bike path subject to the safety and operational requirements set forth in California Vehicle Code Sections 21281 and 21281.5. So they can operate on the bicycle path.
Great. And there would be exemptions from the Segway restriction for both peace officers and people with disabilities.
That's correct. And for park rangers or enforcement personnel from the Department of Recreation and Parks.
And there are guidelines for the operation of the use either on the bike path or for those who have the exemption for the boardwalk.
That's correct. They're state requirements, and they're listed in the ordinance under Section 4, so people will know exactly what those state requirements are.
Like, don't go too fast and don't run people over.
Yeah, right. That's part of it.
Great. Okay. So I'm satisfied with the revised ordinance. It'll be transmitted to council.
It
Colleagues?
should be transmitted this week.
Great. Colleagues, any questions? No. All right, then we will move that forward to council. We will then go to item number 2.
Item number 2 on the regular agenda is the DOT and Department of City Planning to present a verbal report relative to the implementation of the 2010 bicycle plan.
Michelle Mallory, Senior Bicycle Coordinator with LADOT.
David Summers, Department of City Planning, Citywide Section. I work on the bicycle plan as well.
Before you get started, I just want to explain to my colleagues why this item is on the agenda today. There's supposed to be a quarterly report on implementation of the bicycle plan in this committee, and there hasn't been one since I've taken office, so I wanted to make sure we get back on track with that. While the department is still working on a written report that we'll see after recess, I did want to sort of get this into the conversation. I know there's been significant concern among the active transportation community about roadblocks, to use an unfortunate pun, that the bicycle implementation plan has had in various spots. So I wanted us to get an update, see where things are, and also to get folks here on this committee to begin to think about what the proper metrics might be to measure success of implementation of the plan as we move into subsequent years. To give us a summary of where we are.
So we're just going to start by listing some of the activities in the bike plan and some of the things that we've done. For instance, on our facilities end, we've installed this fiscal year 39 miles of bicycle lanes. We have no additional miles of bicycle paths at this point, but know that our staff is working very diligently with the Expo Authority on the Expo Phase 2 segment, and all of that will be on the ground within the next year or so. And we've installed 20 miles of sharrows. We've also continuing to work on a number of projects. David, did you want to talk about the bicycle plan implementation?
Yeah, so for, as you may know, every year, approximately every year, we take on about 40 miles of projects that are on the backbone bicycle network. They're primarily projects that would require some sort of road diet just because of the space allocation that is in the road, the constraints that we're working with to put in. A Class 2 bicycle lane facility would require some reallocation of space in the travel lanes, and so that requires us to engage in somewhat of an extended process. We did get an exemption from the California Environmental Quality Act, but with that, the legislature had still required us to do our due amount of public outreach and also still to continue to evaluate what potential impacts on traffic congestion as well as safety impacts and benefits are for those projects. And so we engage in that process. This year we're taking a slightly different approach than we did last year. Part of the feedback that we heard is that we should really be engaging communities at the outset to engage their participation, to get feedback on design, to highlight any potential issues that they have. So we've hired an outreach consultant, and we're about to engage in a series of roundtable discussions that deal with the invite a diversity of community members to participate, including residents and business owners and bicyclists, so that we can have one conversation and come to some sort of meaningful consensus on how to move forward with bicycle improvements on those corridors. So these are corridors that have a high potential to add to the bicycle network. They address some sort of access, they may address some sort of safety concerns, but then we rely on this engagement to really flesh out what the project will be. So hopefully that will inform the council office and also the department as well on coming up with a really good project that we can move forward with for those corridors. So we're about to engage in those roundtables next week, and we'll be doing that throughout the summer. I'll just say a couple words. A part of this process, we really have a template to follow now with the My Figueroa Streetscape project. The mayor's office, in coordination with CD9 and also CD14, were instrumental in engaging the corridor stakeholders in a discussion and talk about, really what their concerns are that they had for the Figueroa Streetscape project, and we really identified a lot of really tangible solutions that we can work through. And there's a series of working group meetings that are a result of it. We're applying for additional funding for marketing and education and for the project. So it really led to a lot of improvements, and we really hope to replicate that kind of process as we move forward with our implementation. So just to say that the Figueroa Streetscape project is moving forward. Also, we continue to engage the bicycle community and anybody that's interested in quarterly meetings through the bicycle plan implementation team. This last meeting, we had an extended conversation about the mobility plan because it was right in phase of the comment period. So we really had a lot of really great feedback as a result of that discussion, and that's going to help direct us how to shape an even better plan that will go into final adoption. And that's pretty much all I have as far as our implementation and outreach updates, and Michelle will cover the rest.
So I'm just going to continue to update you on some of the projects and programs that we're working on that are a part of the bicycle plan. One of our mandates is to implement the bicycle-friendly street or the neighborhood network. We're now calling them neighborhood-friendly streets in the mobility element. We have 4 projects planned and 3 funded and 1 submitted for funding. They are Berendo Middle School on 11th Street, New Hampshire from 11th Street to Melrose, Pierce and Pacoima, And Budlong is a new project we've just submitted for funding in the express lanes call for projects that Metro just issued. The Budlong project is quite long and covers a segment from Expo to Gage. We are also moving forward with our bicycle-friendly business program, which includes our new workstations and the bike corrals that are moving forward. This year we've installed 3 bicycle corrals on Glendale Boulevard in Atwater, 2 on Abbot Kinney in Venice, and we've got 2 more online that will go in before the next fiscal year ends, and those we're expecting to install on June 18th on North Figueroa and Cypress Park and on Lancashire Boulevard in North Hollywood. That one actually serves the Laemmle Theater, and Greg Laemmle is doing a Tour de Laemmle, 113-mile bike tour of all the Laemmle theaters that'll end at the Corral, and that ought to be quite a celebration. There'll be some information on that on our blog. We've installed 4 repair stations on Colorado Boulevard and Eagle Rock, on York Boulevard and Highland Park, at the Sunset Triangle, and on Lemert Boulevard and Lemert Park. We're also continuing to move forward and develop the bicycle-friendly business districts. It's essentially working with the businesses to identify members of the community that support bicycling and are willing to give discounts to bicyclists who visit their business and can be advertised through the program. The initial pilot project is a steering committee that's been formed in Northeast LA to begin the project there, and we're in discussion with the LA River Corp about establishing an Elysian Valley program adjacent to the LA River there. We continue to work on our bicycle parking, again installing the inverted U bicycle racks you see all around the city. We have about 5,500 of those around the city. We installed 183 this year. We have a number of installations pending as we move forward with hiring a new contractor on the installation. Our Wayfinding program, which is essentially a series of signage that will instruct bicyclists to the closest attractor. So if you happen to be going down 4th Street, you might find out where that it was 2 miles to the museums, or where the Red Line is, or any sort of attractor within the corridor. That program is about a $500,000 project funded through Metro Call for Projects money. We will post about 800 signs as a part of the project. The design is complete. We're trying to get ourselves into the construction phase. It's been pretty difficult. My project manager has moved on to another city we won't mention in the south. The city continues to support legislation as called for in the bicycle plan. The 2 bills that the city has come out in support of are AB 2707, which would allow triple bicycle racks on all buses. This has been a particular issue of difficulty with Metro. Metro's, except the Orange Line, all Metro buses only have a 2 bicycle rack capacity. This would allow Metro to increase to 3. Commuter Express currently does have 3 bicycle racks on all their services. We are also supporting AB 1193, which would support the state of California through Caltrans, through their Highway Design Manual, which is essentially the Bible for bikeway design in the state, to develop a Class 4 cycle track design, something I don't think the state has had a new bikeway design in well over 20, 25 years. But this would allow us to continue to develop more projects as called for in the mobility element and the cycle tracks, but more projects like MyFig that could move forward with standard state design. We also have done a number of funding applications this year. You're all familiar with the ATP process and what's going forward with that. Essentially, we resubmitted with Metro support all the projects that we had funded in the Metro out years, projects that were projected to be funded with future federal transportation dollars that will now be going through the ATP process, and those projects have all been resubmitted and are undergoing review now. I'm a reviewer for projects out of our area. I have a stack of about 53 that need to go forward, so it's going to be an intensive labor-intensive process. Through our PED group taking the lead, we also submitted 4 more bike-friendly street projects, neighborhood-friendly street projects, but they are for Safe Routes to School funding under the ATP. So those are brand new projects that are moving forward as well.
What streets?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that, and I don't remember.
Why did I take my question back?
Thank you. If you'd like, I can get that to your staff so you can be aware. We also have submitted this year 3 funding applications for Highway Safety Improvement Program funds, about $500,000 for bike lanes. Those are some of the projects that David alluded to that we're working through the process, but we, again, have $500,000 to implement bike lanes through state safety money. And then I mentioned that Metro Toll Lane Revenue Grant, again, about $2.4 million for essentially traffic calming measures along along Budlong Avenue from Expo to Gage. And that's kind of the quick rush through of where we've been the last year.
Thank you. Before we do any questions, we have a number of speaker cards, so I'm going to ask folks to give some testimony and maybe a few things to respond to from that, so I'll have you back in just a second. Eric Bruins, Zachary Reinu, David Kapoor. There's 4 chairs, so Jeff Jacob Berger, come on up too.
Great. Good afternoon, council members. Eric Bruins with Los Angeles County Bicycle Coalition. This is a great general update on the bike plan implementation. We're really excited to be working with LADOT on that implementation. I was in a meeting last fall with the senior DOT engineer who laid out the priorities for the department being safety, access, and mobility. And I thought that just in that meeting, I knew the department's made a 180 in the last 3 or 4 years. And if they're really prioritizing safety and access, and then, oh, by the way, if we can move a lot of people through a corridor, great too. I think the roadblocks to the plan right now really have to do with DOT staffing. We have funded positions in Michelle's group that have not been filled, and we have to get those filled right away. We're missing out on grant opportunities because of that. And the second is I laid out DOT's priorities, safety, access, and mobility, and we haven't seen those shared by council offices. And so we're really trying to see, we're seeing bike projects go down for 16 seconds, 40 seconds, 2 minutes of delay during the peak of the peak. And if we really are valuing safety and access for everybody over mobility, then we need to reorient those processes. Thank you.
Hi, Zachary Reinu. I'm a resident in Krikorian's district. In the last year, we just had bike lanes added to Riverside near Colfax that are bookended by Laurel Canyon, the 170 freeway. But at the very ends of these additions, you're thrown into sharrows. So basically, if you're taking the bike lane, you're going to have to fight it out with cars at the end. It's a mixture, and it's not safe. And so my wife doesn't want to use the lanes. My neighbors with their kids, they kind of avoid it. So to me, it almost seems like you have a bridge, but you don't quite have the bridge reach the other side. So as we're coming up on these Lancashire bike lanes, I've called your office a couple times. I've spoken with your staff, and they've been very nice. But, it's very important because me and my wife, we love going to that area, but we're driving in concentric circles, waving to the same people, trying to find the same spots. So it's important to us to have a complete safe network of bike lanes.
Thank you.
Jeff Jacob Berger, I'm the chair of the city's Bicycle Advisory Committee representing the 10th District. I would echo sort of Eric Bruin's comments is, for bike facilities, you're saying go out and compete for grant money. There isn't a lot of general fund money, yet the city is not staffed to either apply for the grants or once the grant money is received, to actually implement the projects in an effective way that, again, keeps us competitive for future grants. And I think that's not a problem just with LADOT, but also in public works as well. You talked a little bit about metrics. I think the metric is not only how many miles of bike lanes are implemented, because the city has been implementing a lot of the easy bike lanes where they can be installed without removing a travel lane or where we know that there's no impact on traffic. The reality is where bike lanes are most needed are in the congested parts of the city, Hollywood, Koreatown, parts of the west side, Westwood, where bikes are truly could be time competitive with a car. And so I think one of the issues to look at is how many of those 40 miles of bike backbone lanes that we've been promised have actually been implemented. I think of the first 40 years, it's been about 10 miles. That's 25%. That's not only an F, that's a pretty low F.
Thanks, Jeff.
Hey, I'm David Kapoor, homeowner and business owner in CD1. I just wanted to urge you guys to fund the active transportation division even more so and talk about my experience with the North Figueroa bike lanes, which were approved as part of the 2010 bike plan. We did a lot of outreach with the community to address the issues, and we worked through everything. And then we have a new councilman in, and now the bike plans are in danger the councilman has gone against the 2010 bike plan and has been doing robocalls, actively campaigning in the neighborhood, raising fear with the residents that the new bike lanes will cause Carmageddon and excessive delay when the studies prove that it's only a 42-second delay at rush hour traffic, and most of the day there is no traffic. So I just want to give some credence and value to these plans that we lay, that they should be more powerful than a city councilman shouldn't be able to reject them. And also urge you guys to look at what's been going on with the North Figueroa bike plan, or with the bike lanes, because the councilman's been actively advocating against them.
Thanks, David. Dale Fernandez, Jennifer Varenchik, and Dennis Hindman.
Well, thank you, council members. My name is Dale Fernandez. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've been working for the past 2 years to bring a bike lane to my neighborhood along Lancashire Boulevard in North Hollywood. I've actually been personally bike commuting from my home in CD4 to my business in CD2 5 years now. Before it seemed like no one was taking these bike lanes, but as the bike lanes were being set in, now I'm actually bumping into people at stoplights and having the community interaction that these bike lanes offer. As a stakeholder in the local area, I commend Councilmember Krikorian's past efforts to get thorough community feedback and discussion of the working groups for Lancashire. I ask that the council members consider making their decision on the merits of each project. I believe too much emphasis is placed on the fear of traffic. Tax money has already been spent on LA DOT traffic studies. These studies demonstrate evidence that this fear of traffic is indeed overblown and unwarranted. Overall, I believe that the city should continue to be more forward-thinking and have the continued courage to implement the master bike plan. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Hello, I am here. I'm new to the bike world. I've been car-free for the past 2 years, and so I feel like I'm coming into this bike world with fresh eyes. And I understand that the bike plan was approved in 2010, yet here we are in 2014, and we're still moving forward with it, which is excellent. My concern is about the bike lane on Lancashire. As a woman bike rider, it was very scary at first going down highly trafficked lanes, and I would love to see, I know that we have plans for bike lanes on Lancashire as well as throughout the whole city, but I'd love to see a dedicated bike lane there. Basically, that's all I wanted to say. Although, one last thing, when you asked if people bike to work, I noticed that there weren't that many hands, and I think that it's important for the people that are making the decisions that are going to be affecting cyclists actually experience what it's like to ride on these lanes. Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis, and while you're speaking, we have one additional speaker who just put his card in, Louis McAdam. If you can come up while he's speaking, and we can move right ahead. Thank you, Dennis.
Okay, my name is Dennis Hyman. I have to be very blunt. Politicians siding with the majority view of the public on whether to install safety improvements for bicycling on arterial streets smacks of what happened in the South in the 1950s and 60s. Due to the wishes of majorities in the South, minorities had separate water fountains in schools, denied places to sleep at hotels, and seating at restaurants, or had to get their food at the back of restaurants and were expected to sit at the back of buses. People who are blind, in a wheelchair, walking, or riding a bicycle should be able to travel where they need to go on arterial streets without the fear of being maimed or killed by a motor vehicle. Separating people from danger is a fundamental principle of industrial safety. Studies of bike lanes have shown that they reduce collisions between motor vehicles and bicycles by 30%. Those that drive should not be able to deny improvements and better access on arterial streets for those that ride bicycles.
Agreed.
Thank you. Sir?
Hi, I'm Louis McAdams, Friends of the Los Angeles River. Just wanted to let you know that starting this weekend, Friends of the Los Angeles River's Frog Spot, which is going to open on the bike path in the Elysian Valley. And it's going to have a place to get a drink of water, wash your hands, relax in the shade, and just an oasis along the Los Angeles River for bike riders. And it will be open every weekend from now until the end of the kayak season in September. And everybody's welcome to come down and hang out on the river at the Frog Spot. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. If staff could come back up, that concludes public comment. So a number of the speakers touched on one of my first questions, which was about the metrics we use to gauge the success of implementation of the bike plan. Eric spoke, and I think quoted you, Michelle, in talking about how it needs to be about safety, access, and mobility. Government being what it is, elected officials being who we are, we're always going to want to know how many miles and what the easy metric is, but it's not necessarily the best metric to measure success. It's always a valuable one to have, but what metrics do we have to measure our improvements in safety, in access, and in mobility?
Well, we're working on a number of things. One of the tools we have been using is something we've been calling the Bicycle Network Score. I'm loath to try to explain this to you, but it's essentially an algorithm that takes all of the lanes within all of the bikeways within the 2010 plan and allows us to score each new project that might go in the ground and it give us an overall score for the build-out of the network. It's something we had submitted to the mayor's office. I will be honest and tell you that the student who worked with this is the proud recipient of a job with tool design in Washington, D.C. now. So we've lost a gentleman who's working on this, but it's something that we would like to continue to work on. What it essentially does is each time we put in a segment, there was some allusion to us putting in easy stuff that didn't connect. This will actually give us, allow us to measure how the network works based on the type of facility we put on the ground, the density of the neighborhood we put in, the car ownership and the name are all in that particular area. So all this stuff is built into the algorithm, and the score will go up as we continue to build out the network. So that's one tool we can use.
What percentage of the backbone network have we built out?
Honestly, I don't know. I heard that comment. I knew you were going to ask, but I don't know. We can check.
Okay. When at the end, after my colleagues are done, I have a number of things I'm going to ask to be included in the written report at the end of the summer. So that'll just be one of them. I understand that you had an intern at one point. You mentioned some of your staffing shortages, but you had an intern who was developing that bicycle network score?
He did development and has moved on. Since we lost, I'm a senior coordinator. Since we lost a coordinator position at the end of January, it's been me and an engineering team. We lost one additional engineer, and the engineering position went on to our public information office. It's projected we're going to lose another one of our associate 3 engineers who's been overseeing the bike lane project, that he'll be moving on to another DOT office within the month. So we are in dire straits as far as staffing is concerned. I thank you for your efforts to put budget more positions for us. We need to be able to fill those positions. DOT finished the paperwork and submitted the coordinator's position in January, and we're almost 5 months out on that.
I want to make sure the audience heard the first part of that, not so much the thank you part, but the underscoring that this council actually took an action in this year's budget that expands staffing for active transportation and helps us get more resources to move forward on this.
It does, but budgeting is one thing, filling is another.
Yes.
It's a long march to get there.
Is the challenge with filling going to be finding the right people or going through the procedural authorization to check all the boxes and make it happen?
It's the city's process. We were instructed by the mayor's office to move quickly. They did not want to see Nate's position, the coordinator position, left vacant for certainly as long as it is. So we advertised immediately, advertised over the month of February and closed it in the month of February. We had 48 candidates apply to us. I gave the package a cursory review. I haven't had time to go through it since, especially since we don't have authority to hire. But we have at least 15 candidates that are extremely well qualified, some of whom we will have already lost. One of them was that gentleman I mentioned that developed the BNS, so I know he will not be counted anymore. Our process is just really hurting us in the ability. I've been doing this 20 years, and I couldn't get anybody to talk to me about bikes 20 years ago, whether it be our legislators or our staff or the students. Nobody was interested, but right now Our grad students think bikes and peds are the mode of the future and how we get to transit, and they're coming out of the woodwork. And honestly, our volunteer and student staff is the only thing keeping us alive right now.
Okay, well, let us know how we can help move things forward, and I'm going to ask for some details on that in your report back as well.
Okay.
I had a question about the development of the 2010 plan, because I think it informs the implementation. There have been concerns raised that various different public safety officials have been weighing in on different segments of projects in different neighborhoods and don't reflect the same perspective that LAPD itself did when the plan was attached. What public safety review LAPD, LAFD was used when the bike plan was first developed?
Well, actually, Claire, Claire, are you still here? Do you want to talk about LAF? I mean, I can talk on a project-by-project basis, but Claire was the lead on the plan.
Good afternoon, Claire Bowen, City Planning. So I was involved in developing the 2010 bicycle plan, and during the development of the plan, we reached out and had conversations with LAPD and LAFD about the different programs we were proposing in the plan. They didn't have any problems with the time, but we also knew that a lot of the devil is in the details, and some of the things we were proposing, we were going to have to still have conversations with them on a project-by-project basis.
And for a lot of folks, putting a bike lane in, particularly a protected bike lane or something like that, is new, is scary. Whether you're a business owner or whether you're a local police captain, it's something different. And you can easily see a piece of data that says this is going to make things take 7 seconds longer to get through, and that doesn't also speak then to the slowing of traffic in a community that actually improves the quality of life for those who live there. What level of engagement are we doing? And I know you're understaffed and overburdened with the local businesses that have concerns and with, say, our local police or fire captains who may have concerns when raised by community members.
Well, let me touch on police and fire to start. We work pretty actively with police and fire, but we have very specific instructions from them that we are to deal directly with headquarters. We are not to deal with the various divisions or the various firehouses. So we have contacts that we work with on LAPD and LAFD. They're aware of their projects that we're moving forward. We have received official positions from them both that neither department has any position on the ability of bicycle lane installation to affect response times. So we've heard that officially from LAPD and LAFD thus far. That said, we've also had folks from LAPD and LAFD come to some of our public meetings, either hosted by the council offices or others, and express differing opinions. And I believe you're right. This may have some concern by the individuals about how the projects would affect them. We've been very specific with one council office that we're working with now that we'd like to sit down with the individuals who might be invited to the meeting so we can go through the plans and explain to them specifically how the roadway configuration will change, where there is access for emergency vehicles. As David mentioned, many of the projects we're doing now are road dyads, which is a kind of a layman's term to talk about how we transition the roadway configuration. Essentially what happens is a channelization, or most of you guys think of this as a painted median, goes up the middle, so it's free space up the middle. The turning movements are allowed for. We usually retain a minimum of a travel lane on each side, and then we are able to install bike lanes and maintain parking. In that situation, LAFD and LAPD certainly have the middle lane as a space to move, and all vehicles are directed to move to the right into the bicycle lane to provide space for emergency vehicles. Did I answer everything?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay.
I want us to get to a point where we're actually talking to the local captains and firefighters. That's obviously needs to be solved at a different
We need
level.
direction from the various departments because, again, LAFD and LAPD have been very clear that we are only to deal with headquarters.
Right.
So.
And that's the message the headquarters is sending is not the same one that's being communicated at the ground level. Okay. Any best practices you learned from the MyFig project about how to do community outreach on a project-by-project basis?
Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, I think with really the leadership of the council office there and the mayor's office, just bringing in the diversity of stakeholders along those corridors and really having, that conversation in one place where everybody gets to hear each other and kind of balance these concerns, and we actually get to work through some of the solutions. I think some of the challenges that we have, especially these road diet projects, is that we may get a lot of enthusiasm and direction from maybe the bicycle community who sees like really the huge promise and benefit of having a full connected bicycle network in the city. When we go out into the neighborhoods and they only see the kind of the traffic end of it, they have certain, would tend to have, it's not always uniform, but tend to have a different perspective. And so we end up having really different conversations. And so my Figueroa stakeholder summit was really an opportunity to bring all these people together and have people really just listen to each other and just come up with solutions on how to make the project better. And so that's what we're really trying to replicate with this roundtable format as we go along these study corridors. And we could certainly look into involving some of the local dispatch offices. With Figueroa, we also did reach out to the LAFD fire and hydrants unit and went over the plans because some of those concerns were brought up too, and we're able to kind of just address any concerns about access along that corridor. So when these issues do come up, we'd like to deal with them directly. And so that's the opportunity I think we wish we would have really for the Figueroa project, is really meet with staff directly and look at, because I think it's really, there may be just a misunderstanding of really what the project entails, and also there's somewhat of apples and oranges. If we delay traffic, we may be delaying, somebody in a squad car sitting in traffic that has to get back to headquarters, or has to get back to their district dispatch or something, and that's going to delay them in that. But it's a different thing when you're talking about actually getting to an emergency. That the corridor will still behave to that.
I did want to mention one thing. The MyFig project is certainly an anomaly. There's a huge amount of funding that's dedicated to that project, and hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on outreach. We don't generally have that sort of budget.
Right. Pop quiz, one sentence or so. I'm a small business owner. I'm concerned about a bike lane or a bike amenity going in on my street. Might take away some parking, might change the nature of traffic patterns on the street. Why is it good for my business district?
Why is it good for your business? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I have a better chance at one sentence here. Slower traffic is better for business because people can actually see your business, and we rarely remove parking for our bike lane projects.
And don't statistics show that business actually picks up in an area with good bike and walking amenities?
There's several studies that support this.
Yeah, we need to be waving those in people's faces. See, I listen when people tell me stuff, Jessica. Colleagues, questions? Mr. Parks? Mr. LaBonge?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, good afternoon. First, how's Alex Baum doing?
He's doing very well. I spoke to him, last time I spoke to him on the phone was last week. He is 92 at the end of this year. And doing very well. I took him to the tour of California earlier.
Very good. Thank you very much. Give him all of our regards. The one thing I wanted to say, and maybe the Bureau of Engineering is not at this table, but I made a motion to direct it, and I see Lewis McAdams here. It's not just the Los Angeles River, but there's a number of washes or channels in the San Fernando Valley that could be converted to freeway movement. You'd have to intersect at the streets. But I want you to look at that. I really want you to get aggressive with that. There's a giant movement going on to reclaim the Los Angeles River, and the same thing should be done is looking at those right-of-ways on either side. Out by Valley College, the Tujunga Wash. In the newspaper this week, Councilman Felipe Fuentes spoke about the connection from the Angeles National Forest, and then in the big Tujunga washes. Are you familiar with that?
I am. And
Okay.
I would like to let you know that all of those are included in the bicycle plan, and we've had some early...
Now, what are you doing about it? I mean, I don't hear anything from you, the professionals.
And we've had some early discussions with some folks working on specifically on Tujunga Wash. Eric, who's somewhere in the audience, in his former life was working specifically on a project with Pacoima Beautiful, and we've had some early discussions on that.
But I also think working with the county supervisors, because county supervisors, a lot of that is county controlled. They look at it as an opportunity. In Mr. Englander's district, they have horse trails on some of them, and even a bikeway on one in the northwest San Fernando Valley. So I think that's real important. And also, have you defined the streets where the good movement should be. In your work, Claire.
We have identified the routes that trucks typically use in the city. Trucks, like bicycles, are actually allowed on all the streets unless they're of a certain size. So trucks are allowed everywhere. So what we've been doing is mapping out where the streets are that trucks are using, and we're working actually with Metro, and we'll be discussing this as part of the mobility plan, is maybe it makes sense for the city to actually adopt a truck network that again would allow the city to direct resources to those streets, because those streets obviously
But
do
you
a
have
lot
to
more
define what
movement.
the good movements is, and that's, you're doing that?
We're doing that as part of the mobility plan.
Okay. And what streets need to, like, I was pleased to hear New Hampshire on the list, because that's something we've talked about many, many years ago. And Vermont is the busiest north-south street. It's very impactful. It's very competitive between any car or vehicle or bicycle and the buses that are there. And I think if you have a parallel streets, to try to find parallel streets, and may transform the parallel streets as well, and I think make it safer, because nothing's worse than an accident, and it's a challenge on those issues there. So those are good things. And Michelle, 20 years ago, there was Alex Baum first, then you, as far as being advocates for bikes, because Mr. Baum was such a close ally to Mr. Bradley as we started some of these deals. I just wanted to throw that out. I also want to know, on sidewalks, what is your opinions professionally riding bikes on sidewalks?
Many major cities do allow bicycles to ride on sidewalks with certain provisions. For instance, the city of Seattle requires bicyclists to make some sort of audible, a bell or a shout out to a pedestrian. Our own current municipal code requires bicyclists to not ride the sidewalks with a, quote, willful or wanton disregard for persons or property. So it's currently legal in the city as long as you don't do so in aggressive
What do you
manner.
think we should do? Because I think on one hand, if you said you shouldn't, then it forces the street to become the place, as opposed to trying, because I see a lot of cyclists who ride up and down the sidewalks and then directly into the street without looking over their shoulder. And so if what I'm looking at you're the engineers. Let me just finish, Michelle. You got to stay, because you're at a formative point in your success where there's a lot of people listening to you and changes are being made. But unless you claim the stake, Mr. Yaroslavsky was against the Diamond Lane, which was a lane that was on the Santa Monica Freeway that was a carpool lane. Mm-hmm. This is about 30 years ago. Had that lane gone in, it probably would have forced something else. The worst traffic is in the west side. Mm-hmm. And so you say to yourself, if you do it right in the beginning, it does cause other things, as Mr. Bonin said. I'm just saying, let's use that as a template. But there also, I got to hear that you want to, like, have you ever been on Santa Monica Boulevard, like at Coinga at all, and sat there for 20 minutes?
In a car?
No, in the sidewalk.
Honestly, I haven't.
Do it, Claire, because it's a truck route, and you'll see why it's a truck route. It's unbelievable. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I've been around a long time, and I was on Santa Monica Boulevard doing a walking street because there's like 39 little theaters there, and they want to make it more friendly, but it's a roar. So do we concentrate on Willoughby or concentrate on Romaine or another adjacent street, to go east-west as opposed to Santa Monica Boulevard at certain points, because I would want that. And also, as a child growing up in the city, we did ride our bikes to school, so I don't know what school has the highest number of bike riders. I see a little of that coming back, but not in the numbers that I, 45 years ago, had. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to just say that licensing bikes, government runs on numbers. So how many bikes do we honestly know? If there's a license program, then you could compete with everything, because statistics matter to government. I'm just saying that's a thing. And I know some riders are against, and I think you're against licensing. I just think it's something, if we want to step up, you got a license, and that way you know how many bikes there are. And the other thing I did want to say is, if you look at a big map of the city, I think you should go in the hub and spoke method, where you really concentrate and spend all your money between USC and downtown, between Figueroa and Colorado and Eagle Rock, all the way through to Occidental on York. You spend it in an area, everything in Venice into Culver City. Because I think our dollar is so weak, if we throw a little in each area, I've heard complaints from some of the advocates that they don't think there's enough. So I think it's real important to look at that sense if you had a plan and you all, whether it's for 4 months, and you do it in 4 different places a year, that you swing into an area on a concentrated team. Mayor Bradley had a traffic impact team, Mr. Bonin, that went in and almost had the plans in the back of the truck and had the signs in the next truck and did the implementation. I think those are some of the things that you would have to look at.
Was that all the money for Venice thing? Was that a motion?
No. Venice, Culver City, that's a motion. So that's very good, Mike. You're listening to me. So continue on. I did have a problem with Figueroa because I'm on the Coliseum Commission, and there are 90,000 people there about 6 days a year, which does have impact. And then it has impact off the neighborhood. But I spoke to Tim, your colleague, and he told me they're going to possibly have a ride-over. Is that correct? A drive-over?
A metro, is that the metro
No,
project?
this is on Figueroa, where there's a Coliseum where 90,000 people come see the University of South Carolina Trojans play the Fighting Irish, a Notre Dame, every other year. And that he said there was some way to drive over the lane? That's what he kind of alluded to.
The current design has because we are required to be physically separated from traffic, it has something that looks like a wheel stop, if you will, like in a parking lot. But there are specific segments of the facility that have a traditional bike lane or a buffered bicycle lane. We have worked specifically with the Coliseum Commission and others to talk about that facility. So in that area, we just have paint. So yes, the ability to drive over that facility is possible.
And personally, when there was the accident on the 2 and the 5 in the tunnel last year, I was just looking at maybe saying, let's go Riverside Drive all the way down. I think you have to, as traffic engineers, Claire, as a planner, but also as traffic engineers, to find alternative streets. If in the event there's an earthquake or a major accident, in this particular case, I think it was 5 days where cars were taken off the freeway and they had to crawl through neighborhoods. Capacity adjacent to a freeway is important. And Selwood, I know you're an engineer back there, but you understand what I'm saying. If you have the freeway and the freeway gets decimated, then it all comes onto the neighborhood. And unless you have an adjacent street to a freeway, you lessen the chance for that emergency route as you go forward. Do you understand what I'm saying, Michelle?
I do. Bicycle lanes would necessarily prohibit that because, again, they're just paint. So we can reach...
Well, no, I understand that, but people respect lanes. Most people do, or try to. So I was just saying that's the challenge I have. I wanted you, Claire, in your big thinking plan, what are our streets? That are alternatives to a freeway. Figueroa is the only north-south clean street, if I could say that, that goes adjacent to the 110, and it goes one way as you get further up the street, but all the way out, Venice and Adams. But anyway, continue the work, and I think you should try to work it as regionally as much as possible. And I'd take the council and flip a coin, come up with 7 areas of the city, and say, okay, we're going to work in the West Valley for 4 months, because that's the way you sow changes. And I see our man from the Miracle Mile right there. The one change we're not going to make is because the subway's coming and the heavy construction. I cannot do any changes that we talked about years ago on 6th Street because the impacts that Wilshire's going to have. So some things, because of heavy construction, we'll have to wait for. So use 8th Street. Okay, thank you, Mr. Bonner.
Thank you. Mr. Krikorian?
Just 2 real quick things. One, you mentioned legislation, a legislative effort that was necessary to be able to enable more bike rack capacity on metro vehicles.
Yes.
What was that bill again, and what's the... Do you know what the legal prohibition is now? That because some of them, you said some of the buses already have 2 and some have 3.
It's AB 2707. I can't remember who the author is.
Okay.
But essentially, the way the law reads now, there is a maximum length that a bus can be, including the bicycle rack when it's deployed.
I see.
This will add a few inches to meet that accommodation. And the 2 bicycle rack, for lack of any other expertise, is about this wide. The triple rack actually staggers the bikes, so it's actually not significantly longer. It's maybe only 6 to 8 inches, but it's just enough to exceed that length.
Okay.
And this new bill would make that change to allow that to happen.
Okay. And there was some discussion earlier about how many sharrows have been added or included in the plan, and I'm just wondering if the department has either conducted
or whether there has been national or other regional study of the relative safety advantages of a dedicated bike lane versus a share-o versus the status quo.
So we have been on a plan to put in about 20 miles of sharrows a year. We did 20.6 this year. And essentially what we're trying to do is connect the networks, small sections where we won't be able to continue the bike lane or things like that, but to provide some sort of connectivity. We conducted, prior to installing our first sharrow in the city, we conducted our own study a few years ago. It's available online. I think I still have some hard copies that I can share with you that talk about the safety improvements in sharrows, and we did find a safety increase. In general terms, we get about an extra foot of passing distance from motorists once you put a sharrow on the ground. That said, we haven't compared the relative safety of a bicycle lane versus a sharrow. We do know that the state and federal funding mechanisms to the safety money that allows us to put a bicycle lane in with, for instance, the HSIP, Highway Safety Improvement Program, highly prioritizes bike lanes as a safety measure. They do not include sharrows at all as a safety measure to increase safety. So we believe that that's a metric that we can look at. We haven't studied them next to each other yet.
Okay, and then one other thing. I was in Washington, D.C. a few months ago and noticed that in many places in the city there are dedicated bike lanes in the median rather than on the side. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if that's possible under California law, if we have done that anywhere, if that's part of the bicycle plan.
We have one, and Councilmember Bonham will remember this because he was there the day we dedicated it for Councilmember Galanter, and that is the Culver median bicycle path. That was a unique circumstance where we had a small residential street next to an arterial street, and we had, for all intents and purposes, a public dumping ground for an abandoned rail right away. So we put one in there. We've had pretty good success with it. We haven't had any collisions or problems with that, and that's generally the issue. How do you design on the intersection? DC, some of the things they've done, I think probably the one you're probably referring to that's most famous is Pennsylvania Avenue, and they had a unique situation there to be able to do that. What I hope that the city continues to look forward are opportunities. What are the ways that we can continue to design things? Now, California actually just last year eliminated the possibility of median bicycle paths. They took them out of the Highway Design Manual and/or recommended specifically against them. The California Bicycle Advisory Committee, which is a state advisory committee, like Jeff's is advisory to the city, I'm actually the chair of that committee, and we recommended that language go back in and has prepared the documents to do that, to allow us for possibilities. Councilmember LaPonge mentioned the intersection of the two freeway, where it feeds back into Glendale Boulevard. We believe that's a circumstance where we can put a median bike path on because of the ramp situation. So we're doing the right things to get it back in there. We want to have a big toolbox so whatever the circumstance occurs that we can design the best facility there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to look forward to the written report. There's a few things I'd like you to incorporate into it, maybe in addition to the other things that you might have done. If you could detail what some of the public safety hurdles have been, sort of a little bit what you talked about earlier with a little bit more detail, so that we can help address those, that would be helpful. It would also be helpful if you included a summary of the best practices from not just MyFig, which you said is bigger than other projects, but some of the other projects you've done about community outreach and engagement and convincing people about the worth of the projects. If you could also include, when you do your statistical breakdown of how much of the network we've built out, if you could break that down into, backbone, sharrow, and bicycle or neighborhood-friendly streets and stuff, so that we can see very clearly where the progress has been made. Also, if you could list in that report parts of the plan or network that have been stalled or deleted or removed, and if there's any plans to replace them, as well as any recommendations you might have about how we can build into implementation of the plan a replacement or substitute requirement. So if you're going to take something out, you've got to put something in. If there needs to be a north-south connection on the west side and I don't happen to like what's in the bike plan, I have to come up with something else so that people can actually connect in my part of town. If you could also list what's next, what are the next things that the next steps of the program that we're supposed to be focusing on. Finally, if you could tease out more of what we were discussing about what you think the right metrics are other than amount of miles, but how do we start better measuring safety, access, and mobility? And of course, if you can include in that also a status update on where we are on hiring the positions that we found funding for.
Okay.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. You have been part of an amazing transformation of what's happened in Los Angeles, and there's lots and lots of people who deserve credit for it. Many of them sitting in the seats here, but you have been early on this, tireless and often alone. So you deserve a whole hell of a lot of credit as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, why don't we adjourn and go into the special agenda?
All right.
Do I need to do anything to say that?
Yes, everything's ready on the special agenda.
All right, we're now going to take up the special agenda for the special meeting of the Transportation Committee that was called for 2:15 today. It is a 3-item agenda. The first 2 items are PPDs, and I would entertain a motion to move those on consent unless anybody had any objections.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Without objection, we'll move those 2 forward. And then the third item on the special agenda is, go ahead.
Number 3 on the special agenda is LADOT report relative to the Signal Construction Improvement Program for fiscal year 2014-15.
Thanks. If Selwyn or appropriate staff could come up. Let me just frame this one a little bit. In the course of this year's budget process, it was made clear that there was a backlog of, I think, was it $30 million worth of signal improvements that were necessary, and the council allocated $6 million through reprogramming of funds to help with the most serious public safety needs for those intersections. And during the course of the budget process, some members of the council wanted to start identifying certain projects they wanted in their neighborhood, and I asked Department of Transportation to first do an analysis of what the public safety needs were throughout the city and try to rank for the council offices what those were and make recommendations to the council on how to spend that $6 million. My understanding is that the department has done that, and thank you for that work, and that you have met with the various different council offices and briefed them. And you have explained not only how this $6 million would be spent, but how other funds from other sources could be used to also help with that $30 million backlog. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. With that set up, ball's in your court.
Thank you. Selwyn Hollins, Department of Transportation. Currently, the department has well over 700 active projects related to signals that we need to work on. About half of those do relate to bike lanes. As bike lanes were created, it kind of shifted some of the striping. So we do have to go out and shift some of the loops and detectors over. What happened with this, it should be made clear that each council district has a number of signal projects. Many of those projects are already funded or planned to be constructed. However, there were a number of projects that are high priority that have no funding, and that was the focus of the $6 million. The $6 million appropriation allowed us to look at those into 3 categories, 3 tiers, a tier 1, or priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. If I could draw your attention to the attachment. The attachment are all of the priority ones that have no funding and that we propose to use the $6 million for. It also has the priority twos that have no funding. All the other priority ones and twos in the various council districts are funded. These are the ones that were remaining at this time. During the course of the year...
Let me just underscore that. So you're saying that this $6 million allows you to cover the unfunded gap of Priority 1 and Priority 2 projects.
That is correct.
So any backlog of Priority 1 and Priority 2 in any of the 15 council districts will be covered through either this $6 million or the alternative funding sources such as grants.
That is correct.
Okay.
There are, however, an extensive number of Priority 3s, and many of those are unfunded. Okay? But Priority 1s are our major focus because those involve either litigation or there's a pattern of collisions, and we need to make improvements to mitigate those types of collisions. So Priority 1s are a major focus. Priority 2s do not necessarily involve crashes, but there are, as explained in the attachment, and particularly on page 4 of the attachment, it also has a summary of what the priorities are. There are various signal improvements that should be made for reasons such as high pedestrian volumes, to move traffic, other needs that don't necessarily involve crashes. So, as it stands now, the department is prepared to begin work on these, the priority ones, starting in July. Doesn't mean we're going to have all of them complete, but our crews, provided we get the backfills that we're currently working with the sales office on, and we're really close, we will be able to start these in July, have our crews work on all the priority ones. The priority twos, they will be able to do some of them. However, priority twos, there's so much work, it's beyond in one single fiscal year for our crews to do alone. So we are looking at the possibility of having to go out to a competitive bid, which takes about 6 months, to try to bring on some additional help. But the focus is priority 1 at this time, because priority 1 obviously, it's the highest level of severity. To give you a perspective, as an interest to, I'm sure some of you are here today, I just want to give you a perspective of the number of projects overall in your districts that are outstanding, that haven't begun, that we've studied. For example, in CD11, in total there are 46 signal projects. 20 of them are funded. This $6 million helps us to get the other ones, priority 1s and 2s, that weren't funded. If I go to Council District 8, there are 23 existing projects that we need to get done. 16 of them have funding outside of the $6 million. In Council District 4, there are 36 projects, 14 are funded. In Council District 2, there are 58 projects and 32 are funded. And in Council District 5, there are 42 projects and 17 are funded.
He's not here, so he doesn't get any projects.
Okay. We did have opportunity to talk to all of the various council districts, primarily your chiefs of staff, explain to them the projects we will be working on, and we got really positive feedback about it. So unless there's...
Did any council offices say, you guys are just off on one of these, this project that you have as a 3 is, it's right next to a school, it really needs to be a priority 1 or a priority 2. Did you get any of those?
No, I think what helped is the fact that there are a number of projects that have been done in many of the council districts over the years, plus when we educate them on those that may not fall under this $6 million category, but that are planned to be, that have funding and will be done, actually the feedback was extremely positive. And we will continue to work during the course of the year because at any time during the year, there are going to be new developments. And we will continue to look at those and study those and make appropriate recommendations.
Great. Mr. Krikorian, any questions? Mr. LaBonge?
Well, one of the questions is that, and I see chiefs here, and Mary, I want a motion that would have the city review restrictions on construction in peak hour. If we're behind in all this infrastructure, your people can't work until after 9 in the morning. Is that correct?
Actually, the mayor's office has been having a series of meetings over the past month. there is development or ideas of a plan to lift some of the peak hour.
Yeah, but I got that idea, so I'm calling it out right now. I'm not going to do it right now. Maria, so give us a motion, because water power has a problem. A lot of crews have to sit, and I think if we work in a coordinated effort, and I also think, Mr. Bonin is the chair, and you're a real smart guy, if we work in one area, concentrate it, then you get a lot done, and then it can move better as opposed to hopscotch. And I think if I could call this all public works, if you do it all one region, then it's easier travel time, concentrated effort.
I'll share your concern. We have another meeting, I believe, next Thursday, and I'll be sure
I'm going to have a motion for Friday to review it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You better move up that meeting. Mr.
all right.
Parks, any questions?
We're good.
I have a couple of questions. Let me ask you, what's the criteria to get on the list? I mean, when you say some people have 42, some have 20, what creates the analysis to get on the list?
Yeah, first of all, there's two primary ways that we start looking at signal improvement projects. One is if we hear a request from the public council office that, hey, there's a concern, and we go out and we study it. The second is sometimes our people are out there and they'll observe something and they initiate it, or it's related to some type of development or construction project. So really it's the eyes and ears out there that, for the most part. For example, in your district, when something occurs, usually we get a phone call or something, we start at that point. We also do, and there is one other area, we do look at crash statistics. And when it's congregated in a certain area, that's also a trigger for us to look more deeply into that.
And then let me ask you, when you say funded, what are the funds that is it just general fund money or is there grant money? How do these projects that you say already funded, where's that money coming from?
Yeah, historically, we apply for grants. We do federal, state grants as they come about. We primarily focus on the priority 1 and priority 2 type categories because those tend to be the most successful for funding. There is some Measure R funding that is supporting some of this and some Prop C funding. But those funds are limited because obviously they're shared across a lot of different other services that the city provides. The grant funding we've been very successful over the years, but it does take more time. What this does with the $6 million that Chairman Bonin had added to the budget, it actually accelerates our ability to get some of this stuff done and not have to wait for the opportunities to file for grant funding.
Is there a list prepared that has the projects that are funded outside of this source?
Yes.
Could you share that with us, or is that top secret? Or
what I'd like to do is we want to continue to work with each council office and share theirs in particular because some of it is summarized and there may be some of it, you want to explain what it is and what's involved, but we can certainly share that.
I'd like to know what the 20 plus that are funded in addition to these two, just to be aware of where they are and things like that.
I can
and what
share
the
that.
cost is and things like that.
I can definitely share that with you. We can do it this week.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to thank you for your shepherding of this particular project. You compiled this list quickly. You did it thoughtfully. You consulted with every council office in a great collaborative way. This could have taken a long time to do. This could have been a mess, and you did it well. You did it quickly, and I'm very, very pleased. I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
So without objection,
just a quick question.
Call Mr. LeBon.
LADOT engineers develop ADSAC, right?
Yes.
And did we patent it, or do we get when the city of Chicago uses it, or Seattle, or do we know that history? This is in the 1984 build-up of the games.
Do we patent it?
Right. It's a design. I think he was, I don't know, it may predate everybody here as far as the history, but find out if you would next time we see you. Maria, if you check it out too, do we patent everything? And I don't.
Phil Lamb in our office would probably have that information.
The city attorney will handle this one. Let us know, okay? Check with Phil for us, will you? Thank you. That's all right. No, you're a good man.
Without objection, we will then move this forward. Thank you very much. We will now adjourn the special meeting and reconvene the regular meeting. We'll start with item number 3.
Item number 3 is a Department of City Planning to present a verbal report relative to the mobility element.
Good afternoon. Claire Bowen, Department of City Planning. Thank you for having me here today. So it's nice that this follows the discussion you had about the bicycle plan. The bicycle plan is a chapter of today's existing transportation element that's part of the city's general plan. While we did the bicycle plan a couple of years ago, it obviously just focused on bicycles, and there's a lot of other ways we use to get around the city. So the mobility plan that we're doing now really provides us an opportunity to kind of step back and think about how we can set forth a vision for the future to guide us and help how we move and we connect people to a diverse range of uses, to their homes, to their schools, to their jobs, using a range of options for bicycles, using their car, helping how goods connect and get to our places, how we connect people through using for walking, transit riders, or equestrians. So this is a pretty comprehensive plan. I've got a lot to cover, but I'm going to try to keep it pretty high level just in the interest of time. I know I also tend to talk pretty fast. So as I go through this, if there's questions, you want me to kind of dive in a little bit deeper, please don't hesitate to stop and ask me.
If you could just give just a little bit of context to start about last time this was done, what the process is going to be, and what point we're at in the process?
Yes, I've got that included in my presentation.
Very good, thanks.
So we kicked this off about 2.5 years ago, and obviously, as anything we do in the city, it includes a lot of community outreach, and that included neighborhood councils, homeowners associations, nonprofit organizations, bicycle advocates, pedestrian advocates, goods movement organizations, as well as obviously city staff. Planning is the lead on this document, but we want to be making sure that we're partners all the way along through this process with Department of Transportation, Bureau of Engineering, Bureau of Sanitation, Bureau of Street Services, etc. So we informed a TAC that included all those, plus we had a task force of community stakeholders. Oops, wait a minute, gone too far. So while we started 2.5 years ago, we now are kind of towards the end of the process. We just completed a 90-day public comment period. That comment period was on the plan as well as the environmental impact report. We are evaluating those comments now. We'll be spending the summer finalizing the plan and then going back and talking with all our departments to make sure that they're all, aligned with the revised components of the plan. Our intent is to go to City Planning Commission in October, and then obviously on to committee, and then the mayor's office, and then back to City Council. This will be a resolution, so we'll go to the mayor's office first. So why are we doing this plan? Obviously, as a city, we have a traffic problem. We are 3.8 million people, and we're growing. And we've got about 468 million square miles, and we don't plan, at least not as far as I'm aware, of adding any more kind of mileage. We've got about, or any more square footage. We've got about 7,500 miles of streets and 181 miles of freeways. So it's really about thinking about how we can, if we're not going to add capacity to the streets, how we can think about using different alternatives that perhaps provide people better and cheaper options. We also know that the state has kind of given us some direction. So as we start to think about how we can accommodate people using all these other modes, there's legislation that's telling us we need to be mindful of greenhouse gas emissions. So how can we redesign the way we get around so that it uses less carbon? We also know there's acts, things like the Complete Streets Act, that tell us when you update a general plan document like this that you have to consider the role of pedestrians and bicyclists and goods movement. So really you're accommodating everybody. There's also a new legislation called SB 743 that's actually ultimately going to eliminate LOS as a means of analyzing the streets. So there's a lot of things happening at the state level that are helping guide this document. So obviously, in addition to traffic, the traffic and the kind of land use patterns we've had have exacerbated not only the traffic problems, but a lot of other problems. We know that because people spend a lot of time in their car, that 25% of children are obese in the city of Los Angeles, and that there are 36,000 and more Angelinos that are either injured or killed in motor collisions every year, and it's 100 per day. Then 48% of those traffic fatalities are pedestrians and bicyclists. We also had 57 unhealthy air quality days in 2012. And we had 4 in 10 of California's most polluted beaches are in LA County. And all these things are attributable to a lot of the traffic problems we have today. But one of the things the plan is going to do is trying to address some of those issues. And one of the ways we're doing that is we're saying, let's rethink about how we move people around and let's create these key goals that start to put an emphasis on safety and that really talk about how we're going to provide people access to those different uses and how we're going to provide them different options for getting there. I feel like something's out of order here. Let me just go back real quick here. No, that's okay. So part of it, when we start to look at the process, it's how can we think about accommodating the different kinds of users so that people have different choices and different options. And luckily, a lot of people today are already using these other choices. We know that 64,000 people actually walk to work every day in the city of Los Angeles, and that there's been a 56% increase in the amount of people who bike to work between 2000 and 2010, and already 1.5 million people are riding Metro Rail and buses on a typical work day. But what we've heard from people is they want to have more of a greater variety of options, and they want to be eased in how they get around those different options. The nice thing about it is if we can start to think about do a better job accommodating all these other users, that there's a lot of potential in our future, so that some of those safety problems that we have today can be brought down. If we can provide more opportunities for people to walk and bike comfortably, we can reduce the number of collisions that are out there. We can reduce the amount of obesity by making it easier for people to get around and walk. We can reduce air pollution, and we can actually hopefully reduce the amount of time and money people spend commuting by providing additional attractive alternatives. So one of the ways that we're proposing to do this is actually creating a complete streets network. And so it's going to focus on, we know that we have a limited number of streets. I talked about the 7,500 miles of streets we have in the city, and again, that we're not going to probably grow those out. So we said, well, let's think about how we might identify a subset of those streets to help move one specific mode or another. So we have a variety of these, and the first one focuses on pedestrians, and this is less of a network, but what we did is we analyzed where are the places in the city where we have like the highest rates of collision today, where are the places in the city where there's a lot of destinations people want to get to, and where are places today that there's a lot of high number of uses. So let's use this kind of data and criteria to prioritize how we spend our money in the future. Sorry, this thing keeps jumping around me. The other thing we did was say, so on the transit, we took a look at all the different transit buses that are out there today, and we said, what if we use the transit system as it is today as a base, and we said, which of those streets, if we could enhance a certain number of streets and maybe put a bus-only lane all the time or on the peak period so that you could facilitate buses being on there so they weren't stuck in traffic. And so if somebody knew there was a reliable and frequent bus, they'd be more encouraged to be able to go and use the bus. This is just an example of, so if we took Van Nuys Boulevard in the valley and then added a bicycle lane during like the peak hour, this is what it might look like. The other thing we did, we looked at the bicycle plan and we said, what if that backbone network, a subset of it, was upgraded to cycle tracks? Because one of the things we heard loud and clear from the community was bicycle lanes are great for your more experienced bicyclists, but they're not comfortable for that wider range of bicyclists. Sorry, this thing has a mind of its own. And so we knew that people kept saying to us, provide something that's safer. And even drivers were saying they'd feel more comfortable if bicyclists were in a cycle track. They wanted a little bit more separation as well. But we obviously can't do that everywhere. It takes up a lot of space. We said, again, let's look at a subset of our backbone network, and what if we upgraded those streets to be a system of cycle tracks. And what we did, and to address some of the Councilman Labanja's concerns that he addressed earlier, there are streets in the backbone network, things like Vermont Boulevard, for example, where we said, you know what, Vermont probably actually belongs more on the transit network, where we're trying in terms of trying to prioritize. And so we looked at a parallel facility in there. So the backbone, this BEN network, we're calling the Bicycle Enhanced Network, will comprise of cycle tracks, as well as, especially in the mid-city area where it's already so congested, that we probably will use more of those local parallel streets and do a robust amount of those neighborhood street improvements. So this is an example of 7th Street downtown, has a bicycle lane on it today. which is still sometimes I'm a pretty experienced bicyclist, and I find 7th Street a little unnerving because you've got a lot of buses that are pulling over you. But if you instead you added the cycle track, you still have the parking, because the parking again acts as a buffer. In this case, you can't see the parking because they've actually put a bicycle kind of corral parking in that space, but you can use that parking for a lot of different uses, for the bicycle parking as well as parking. But you've got a lane of, still have a lane of traffic, you have a lane for the bicycles as well as parking. So that really starts to become a much more complete street, and as you can see, we think it starts to become a lot more user-friendly for a lot of different users. The other thing we did was we said, okay, while all the streets are still for cars, that it might make sense for us to take a look at some of the places in the city that don't have the freeway access, because the freeway system was not built out everywhere. So we looked at a subset of streets, again, a fairly small number, where we might want to take a look at what we could do to facilitate traffic flows through those areas. Maybe it's doing something like this on Olympic Boulevard, where obviously there's a lot of lanes of traffic, but we know this gets very congested, especially on, the morning and evening rush hour. And maybe we took one of those lanes and we allowed it so that you could have 4 lanes going one direction and 2 the other, just on those peak hours. So you're not trying to widen the streets, you're trying to, again, kind of manage and kind of work within your means.
Like 4th Street west of the Art District, east of the Art District.
Exactly, yes. Oops. Yeah, there's a thing in here I think I skipped over a slide. Because one of the things I wanted to say was a key part of this plan is our action plan, because there's a lot of things we all want to do. And I've mentioned, the networks, but there's also, we need to be able to do a better job communicating to people what are the different options. We need to be able to make sure that we're analyzing how effective these are. You guys talked a lot about during the bicycle plan about how we're counting. So we've actually got programs in there about communication. We have programs about data so that we can do more monitoring of collisions. We have programs in the plan that talk about education, so it's doing workshops for pedestrians and bicyclists and drivers so that we all are doing a better job managing the streets, more roadway safety education. We have programs that talk about enforcement. We need to do a better job like managing our commercial loading zones, because we know that groups, organizations like UPS spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on traffic tickets because they don't have a proper place to load their van, to load and unload their vans. So that's something we can do through
I don't
more
think you've
enforcement.
changed the size of a loading zone since there was a beer truck that used to fit in there. I mean, now it's a full truck. I think there's one thing that's really changed.
Right, so I think we need to take a look at that. So there are a lot that we can take a look at how we're using or things, and we need to do more in job enforcement, like in the speed limit. There's things we can do in terms of engineering. We want to look at how we can, we want to eliminate, what was I trying to say? We want to do things like improving more green alleys. Funding is a big part of the plan. One of the challenges people keep saying is, well, how much is this going to cost? And I guess one of my answers to that is, it's not about necessarily that this plan needs a whole lot more money. It's, again, setting up priorities and strategies so the monies we have today or the monies we have in the future, we can do a better job kind of allocating those to these different things, and having actually in place a priority grading system, so again that we make the smart decisions and put the monies in the places where it's needed the most. We also have programs in about legislation so that we can do a better job advocating for more funding. Maintenance, obviously there's a lot of need for maintaining the facilities and doing a better job like notifying people when streets are going to be closed. Management, we want to create a system where the departments are doing a better job working together. So again, we can be kind of leveraging our individual efforts within the different departments, and then work together more, and also do that more regional cooperation. We have programs about operations, so that again, we're helping coordinate shuttle buses, connecting with transit, creating feeder networks, and programs about parking. Obviously, parking is a huge issue that we kind of really haven't talked so much about, but there's a lot of just things we want to do in the future that talk about how we perhaps use and manage, the curb parking or the on-street loading zones. Programs about planning, so we do a better job kind of helping coordinate our transit with where our existing land uses are. Public space, programs about supporting the idea of creating more great streets, creating more people streets, and programs around schools, so we can look at we'll coordinate with the school department about how we facilitate active transportation connections to our school. So there's a lot this plan is trying to do, and one of the things we'll be doing when we come forth in the fall, we'll be talking about how we prioritize all these different things moving forward. So one of the last things we're doing is also changing all the street standards in the city on the arterial level, because the street standards today include very narrow sidewalks, and typically we have a lot of streets today that are actually substandard, and what we tend to want to do is widen those streets, and which we don't want. And again, it's about living within our means. So we're actually creating new street categories that actually reflect the actual street dimensions we have out there today. So part of this effort will include those new street standards as well, and then redesignating every arterial to one of these new street standards to eliminate that widening.
Widen sidewalks, don't widen streets.
Exactly. And then obviously coordination is going to be a big part of this plan moving forward. And that's it.
Claire, thank you for that presentation. I'm glad to see the vision that's developing in the city. And I got to say, I asked my staff before the meeting, I said, is this going to be like a bureaucratic talk and I'm going to have to try to translate this into English? Because sometimes that happens in committees. But this was very clear and plain spoken, and I love that you could visualize the kind of things that we're looking to start doing in Los Angeles. This is one of those things that it's hard to get the community to engage in. It's hard to get people to engage in envisioning a concept as opposed to weighing in on a particular project. Ms. Martinez joked to me one morning when I came into council that she saw on Facebook I was at a community meeting, and it seems like any meeting I go to in my district has at least 60 people. And I think there was a meeting on the mobility element in my district this week, and this was the one meeting I can think of that didn't have 60 people. It was just a handful, I guess. How has community outreach been going?
So community engagement around a big issue like this is really challenging. The meeting you actually just talked about was the West Side Mobility Study, and we've had a parallel. That started before this plan did, so I think that part of the challenge for us is there's a lot of things actually going on in the city and helping people, whether you're like we're implementing the bicycle plan, but now we're also doing the mobilities plan, and we have this West Side Mobility Study, so that gets confusing. But I think it's hard for people because this is this big kind of vision document. We're talking about setting a new recipe for how we're going to move forward for the next 20, 25 years. And I think it's something it's hard for people to kind of get their hands around and how this will actually affect them. If you have a meeting where you're going to talk about changing a specific street, we can turn out lots and lots and lots of people. But when these bigger efforts, we definitely struggled. So what we did on this effort, we did the traditional workshops, but we also had a big online presence. And actually, my law is in the audience, who's actually our day-to-day project manager on this, and she's really been maintaining a blog where we're regularly sending information out, and we maintain what we did. We did a town hall, so we were able to ask questions of the community. People could respond to us. We did this really early on, asking people their priorities, their concerns. And the best part about that is that we were able to reach an audience that we don't traditionally see at our community workshops. They tend to be younger. They tended to be representative more of the community, and we were also able to see what parts of the city we were not hitting, and then we could go work with organizations in those areas, like in South LA, to try to beef up those conversations.
So how do we, once this is done, how do we prevent this from not just sitting on a shelf? I sometimes say that the community plans are the things that everybody who comes into my office with a development project is seeking to ignore or be exempted from. So how do we get this to be real?
Right, so that's an excellent question. So one of the great things you guys have already done to help support this plan is there are 2 staff persons in the planning department that will be in the planning department once this plan is adopted. So we actually have 2 people, mobility planners, that will be implementing this plan. They will also then obviously be working hand in hand with all the other departments. And so the key really to me is leadership at the council level, going from now for the next 25 years, continuing to make this a priority. It'll rely on leadership from the mayor's office. It'll rely on leadership from the different general managers at all these departments to continue to make these kinds of things a priority. And then it'll be really important for the staff, in those different departments to continue to fight to have these different kind of changes happen.
That's a roll of the dice. I mean, it's dependent upon a lot of things. I mean,
Right, it is depending upon
it's a long-range plan, different elected officials come, different department heads, different staff. Mr. Fuentes put in an interesting motion the other day about street resurfacing, and it starts to look at street resurfacing projects in a way so that when they're done, they have to include sustainability features, bioswales, permeable pavement, stuff like that, so that we're also achieving our sustainability objectives at the same time we resurface, or in a way that looks at prioritizing those that meet both objectives. I'm wondering, just is there a way to start thinking about building in similar things into how we do things that would sort of make these concrete requirements or prioritize projects that better meet the mobility element?
So that's I think the best way to answer that is we have one thing I didn't even get into because there's a lot to talk about with this plan, but one of the other things we're doing as part of this plan is developing a complete street manual that will include cross-sections and visuals to describe, so if a street is what we're now going to be calling an Avenue 1, for example. We tended to call everything highways before, so now we're going to rebrand things as boulevards and avenues. They're a little bit more friendly to a variety of uses. So if you have an Avenue 1 and that Avenue 1 happened to be on a transit-enhanced network, we're going to give you cross-sections that are going to be able to guide the community as well as the engineers. What are the kind of improvements that should go in this street? The manual also includes different Green Street features so that we have standards in place about how we can do better infiltration, in that parkway area. So trying to create the tools so that engineers have those at their disposal moving forward.
Thank you. Mr. Park? Mr. Labange?
Yeah, so you want to change the name of boulevard or avenue or street?
So the name of the street wouldn't change.
In Los Angeles, avenues go, like you said Vermont Boulevard is Vermont Avenue. I didn't want to correct you, but.
It is Vermont Avenue? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So anyway, but in some cities, avenues, like in New York, avenues go this way and streets go that way, whatever, but Los Angeles doesn't have that. But if we propose to change them, that's a big cost to people who have businesses or names or something. That's a thing you want to think about.
Right. So we're not proposing to change the names of the streets in any way. What we're proposing to change is kind of the wonky terminology we use for designating the type of street something is in terms of its width. So today we call things major highway class 1 and 2 and secondary highway. And what a lot of cities around the country are doing, again, to call their street something that is a little bit less focused on just the car. They're using kind of generic terms like boulevard and avenue just as ways of kind of just describing the type of street. When we could call them street 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, they're kind of more technical terminology. But the street, like even if a street is technically an Avenue 1, for example, in terms of that really just says that it's a 70-foot road bed with a 15-foot wide sidewalk, that street its name might still be Santa Monica Boulevard or Vermont Avenue.
The other thing, too, there's a building line and then there's a property line, correct?
Right, the build-to line, if there's any
Right.
required...
I prefer to push the building back and let the building go higher to get more space. I think that makes it more welcoming as opposed to some... West Hollywood, and I don't know if anybody's here from West Hollywood, but a lot of their projects, they build right on the edge of the property line, and there's no sidewalk, there's no air mass of space. So I think it's real important to look at that. Also, I think Larchmont Boulevard, by benefit of the fact that it only goes between Melrose and 3rd Street, and as the center part that is the commercial site, is almost an ideal. The villages of our city, Lemert Park is a village area that's designed that way. Trying to highlight those that you can run with very quickly. People do like transformation. Silver Lake Boulevard, which is not the West Silver Lake, but that transformed into a village under Mr. Garcetti's term as a councilman and now enhanced by Mr. O'Farrell. So trying to find little villages, I think, really helps for that. And again, but there's some streets that got to carry traffic.
Right, there's
and
a lot.
That's the one thing. And then the MTA is a big thing, too, that how it impacts that. But also, even on Wilshire Boulevard, they had wide sidewalks in the Miracle Mile because people would window shop, which I don't think we window shop anymore. They screen shop on their own computers. So there's a whole transformation. And it's interesting to look at, I'll close right now, Mr. Chairman, Miracle Mile, all the parking was in the back. and then they enter from the back, so you lose the street life. When we had crime problems, they shut off the front entrance because people would run out the street. So some of those impacts, that go on. And then also, the thing too, are you familiar with the vendor program coming forward at all? Street vendors?
Oh, about people being able to sell like fruits and vegetables on the street?
Yeah.
I'm familiar with some of the interest in doing.
How do you feel about that?
I think with the proper licensing, because you want to make sure that the products that are being sold are safe for people and people have, bought them in appropriate places. But I think it helps liven up the streets. I spent 2 years in the Dominican Republic as part of a Peace Corps stint, and that was just a part of the culture there. And it was fabulous. But
yeah.
I think again,
but I would rather see you as planners, and I see Ken Bernstein back there from the planning department. After the 71 earthquake, a lot of buildings got taken down or had to change, and then also parking requirements really stuck in there, and they created what is the mini mall. I'd rather see us take a mini mall and look at a corner of a mini mall and create space, which food, which vegetables or something healthy, not something that's shipped in a container from around the world here that could be bought in a store, but to create a space on a plaza.
Right.
Because I fear about the danger of people in the streets and people walking the streets now, some places where they're doing that. But anyway, I'd rather see you transform that as far as in your great streets or great neighborhood initiative.
So one of the things we're doing is parallel to the mobility plan. We're developing right now what we're calling a health and wellness element of the city's general plan. It's called the Plan for Healthy Los Angeles, and it's actually addressing some of those issues firsthand because we've been hearing from communities around the city how challenging it is for them to access good quality, and affordable fruits and vegetables. So there's a lot of conversations there about corner store conversions. There's obviously things in the mobility plan that again talk about how to kind of repurpose street spaces.
And in my lifetime too, the stores used to have like a accordion up front, and they just pushed open. I don't know if they had it in Boston because they did. Only in the summer did they open it, right? Because it snowed in the winter.
We're hardy folk.
Oh, hardy. Boston strong. Very good. But they would actually take the front, Claire. I never saw this, and it opened up in the whole store. It's a whole different configuration. So it'd be interesting to work with the AIA and others to do outside-the-box thinking on that, but also pick streets that could be villages that doesn't have the drive-through capability and the diagonal parking that has, what do you call them, DOT officers who don't write tickets at 7:56 when the meter goes off at 8 o'clock. Some of that compassion.
Right. Well, the Mayor's Great Streets program that you're all participating in is a great place to kind of do that kind of Main Street urban acupuncture throughout the city.
Mr. Krikorian? Thank you, Claire. Before we wrap up, there were two public comment cards, Doug Arsenault and Dennis Heineman, on this item.
Hi, I'm Dennis Hyman. To get an idea of where LA is in terms of bicycle infrastructure, it's a good idea to compare the city to other large cities. Of the 90 largest U.S. cities, Portland, Seattle, Washington, D.C., Minneapolis, and San Francisco have the highest bicycle commuting mode share in 2012, from 3.8% in San Francisco to 6% for Portland. Seattle had the lowest amount of bike lanes and miles of bike lanes and paths per square mile of these 5 cities in 2009. LA is now approximately 113 miles of bike lanes and paths short of matching that. In the community of Wilmington, the DOT has miraculously, shortly, there will be as many bike lanes and paths per square miles as any of these top 5 bicycle commuting mode share cities. All but 2 of the bike lanes will connect to at least one other bike lane or bike path. So Wilmington can shortly have a very dense network of bike lanes that can serve as a test model for the rest of the city, what will take place if you put it in.
Okay. Is Doug Arsenault here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought Mr. Levant would entertain everyone while I ran to the restroom. Good afternoon. My name is Doug Arsenault of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, leading community partner in the San Fernando Valley, representing employers of more than 250,000 commuters. Bike wishes to thank Claire on her extraordinary effort and community engagement. Overall, we support the plan and its focus on technology to relieve congestion and commitment to provide quality transit for underserved communities, such as the majority-minority East Valley with our ridiculously limited 1.5 miles of rail and overcrowded BRT system. That being said, VICA and the business community overall is very concerned by one major approach taken by the plan, the prioritization of bikeways over roadway and transit. Even by the most optimistic accounts, bicycle use will come nowhere near close to equaling those modes as business people and families need larger capacity, swifter modes. It's not to say that we're anti-bike. Bikeways should be part of a complete street system, including mobility hubs. However, the bulk of resources and mode prioritization should be dedicated to roadway improvements, particularly as the city streets are in failing condition. Thank you.
Doug. All right, without objection, we will receive and file that item. We're going to skip item 4 and go to item number 5. Chief, come up.
Item number 5 is a budget recommendation instructing LADOT to report relative to how traffic control officers are assigned to traffic gridlock intersections and the metrics that are used to determine which intersections receive manual traffic control.
Chief, I want to start with an apology for calling you so late in the meeting.
Oh, no.
I saw a note from my staff just now. I should have called you earlier. It's particularly baffling for an elected official to talk about the need to have our traffic control officers out at intersections more and not be doing other things and then have them sitting here for a couple hours. So I apologize. Next time you're before the committee, you're first up.
No problem.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I think I want to second the motion. Chief, give him a ticket. Okay.
We could have had the chief out of Coldwater and Ventura all this.
Yeah, exactly. You mean at Sunset and Barrington. Chief, thank you for being here today. I wanted to have this item in committee shortly after the budget process because part of what happened in the sort of rewriting of the Transportation Department budget this year is, we gave an instruction that we want the department to start moving more in the line of using full-time traffic control officers as opposed to part-time and trying to use them to help us at some of our gridlocked intersections, particularly the phenomenon of folks who get stuck in the middle of an intersection because they think they're going to make it and they don't, and then we get everybody jammed up. It happens in every district throughout the city. It happens regularly at Venice and Lincoln, for instance, in CD11. And I think one of the lines of thinking was if we're going to be bringing on more staff, we shouldn't be doing it as a way to sort of ding our constituents, but as a way to help them. So wanted to bring you in today and just get your thoughts on how we can start moving in that direction in the next year.
Yes, absolutely. What you're discussing is what we call the TOKI program, Traffic Officers at Key Intersections. It's a program that started back in 2002-03 when they first started hiring extra traffic officers for that purpose. It has dwindled over years up until now as the need has been elsewhere. And so right now we're looking at all the criteria that was submitted back then, including Mr. LeBonge's 6-2 plan, as to ways to get our officers out there and get a fair balance between traffic direction and traffic enforcement for traffic parking turnover and things like that. We do have metrics as you required. The metrics that we used back then was first we polled all council district offices for problem intersections because generally the public tells us where the problem is sometimes before we spot it. So we took that information. There was roughly 150 intersections that qualified for review. Then we dispatched officers to do what we call a time study at the intersections, and basically they determine that if it takes, how long it takes to get from one controlled intersection to the next, and how long a person is stuck in the middle, in the box, so to speak. If it's for more than 25% of the time of the rotation of the signal, that qualified that intersection for a TOKI. And then we would do a period of time of studying that. We would assign a traffic officer to it and then take them out after a couple of weeks to see if there's been any improvement to whether we continue it or not. Since that time, obviously, we've been looking at the availability of data from ATSAC. We've been talking with the engineers at ATSAC. Their system is live time, and they can provide us by intersection. In other words, if I want to look at Lincoln and Venice and say, give me the delay, how long is it taking traffic to get through, they can give us live delay on that day. And so we'd want to do random checks throughout a week or throughout a month to determine whether there was some anomaly that day, whether it was either good or bad, and then we would go back and look at the possibility of putting an officer in there. In addition, the advances on ADSAC have also brought forward the ability to change the timing, and the engineers at ADSAC can assist in relieving the traffic congestion in the box by adjusting the timing on the lights, as long as we've identified that there is a problem there. So that's how we did it in the past, and that's how we would work going forward. We would identify a cadre of officers based on the intersections that we have. Currently, we've pulled the list that we had from before, and we've compared that to current traffic patterns by discussing it with our area captains to see what intersections they recommend. Some remain on the list, some don't, but we can evaluate any intersection for that need.
Very good. Yeah, I had suggested during the process that maybe ATSAC was the metric. It may not be. I mean, the fact that you consulted with council offices last time, always, a metric that the council offices appreciate. But also the sort of street level view of the captains as well. We've got a number of cards, so maybe we call them up before we, why don't you stay there, and then the colleagues can ask questions. Charles Leone, Gaynell McPherson, Lisa Neal.
Lisa and Gaynell had to go. Thank you so much.
Okay. Charles Leone, Gordon McCullough, and Jason Stemler.
Gordon also had to go, but he'll have another opportunity, I'm sure, to speak before you and your body. Chair Bonin, it's good to see you this afternoon, and thanks for this opportunity to you and your committee. Here's the reality when it comes to traffic and intersection control in the city of Los Angeles since 2008. The service is down 74%. We've used the city's very own CAFA reports to look at that data. You look at that reality, the fact that their workforce in the city of Los Angeles, 47% of them are going to be eligible to retire in the next 5 years. And on top of it, you have a growing population in the city of Los Angeles, because you look around us, streets are only getting more congested, the population is only increasing, and the need for the Bureau of Transportation to return to full services is only going to be heightened. And that's really what it's about. It's about services and a restoration of services. The last 4 years, 5 years, a lot of political pressure about writing those tickets, getting those tickets, bringing in the revenue, and our traffic officers do a good job. It's our call, and we support an effort to work to bring in more full-time traffic officers, staff them at 6:30. You're already budgeting them right now. You're using those extras for the funding of the part-timers. And let's do a full transition. Let's work with Rick Cole in the mayor's office. Let's do it together. Let's do it by next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles. Is Jason Stemler here? Okay. Mr. Labange, any questions for the chief?
No, just a question. What if we hired recruits who are pending employment with the LAPD and they were just traffic and trained to do traffic control? I would just say the money is not there to do everything we want to do, but I'm looking for sometimes people who park in a career. I know in the past, this is a distant past, but people who wanted to be on the Los Angeles Fire Department became a Los Angeles police officer and then lateraled. It's just a thought to look at that. And I also think maybe even working with civil service to develop a traffic control officer in the street. I don't know how you class them out, but because I think it would be an effective tool. In the city of Washington, our nation's capital, they do have peak hour restrictions and traffic officers in the street in large numbers, and it's something I think we've got to get back to because we can't build our way out of it, but I think we can control it. Nothing upsets the public more when they get in a green light and there's the box is blocked. So you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, correct. We do have a structure that we can work with, I believe, within DOT as far as we have traffic officer 1, 2, and maybe we add a 3 or adjust something like that. But basically our traffic officer 2s do the full range of duties. Our part-time traffic officer 1s only do traffic parking management.
Right. And I have no problem with part-time because sometimes it's a good employee who becomes full-time in the future. They're a college student or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, we've transitioned probably 45 to 50 from the part-time program to the full-time officer.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Chief, if you could report back in August and let us have a status report on the hiring of the 5 full-time TCOs. Give us a report on, let's say the past quarter's deployment of TCOs, where they've been, how they've been assigned, and let us know what criteria you're looking to use to assign them to gridlocked intersections and what metrics you recommend we use to evaluate how successful that's been.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Holding this in committee pending the report?
Yes.
Very good.
Yes. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Again, you're first up next time.
Oh, no worries. I'm here. It's your pleasure.
All right, I believe there's one item left, item number 4.
Item number 4 is a Labange motion rescinding the council action relative to authorizing DOT to execute a 5-year contract with Hertz On Demand to provide car sharing services, and a report on the recommendation for implementation of a robust car share program in the city.
Come on up. Okay. Please just give us a thumbnail of what this is and why we need to do it.
Okay, I'm Dee Allen with LADOT Parking Management, and I have Tamara Martin, who is the project coordinator for this project. What we'd like to do is, we're supportive of this motion. As you may remember, last year we came to you asking for the authority to execute a contract with Hertz On Demand to do a city car share program. We went forward after that approval and began to negotiate the contract with Hertz, and negotiations fell through. Hertz was basically non-responsive, and I mean non-responsive. We didn't hear from them after some initial conversations. And so what we want to do now is we've had discussions with your offices and a number of folks in the industry to look at what kind of program we would have to have a car share program. So this action today really sort of closes the book on the RFP and the work that we did with Hertz. And it allows us now to come back to you in 60 days with recommendations of what a car share program would look like in the city of LA, using probably a different business model. It would be, we're looking at a permitted program. Under the existing Hertz contract, it was an exclusive 5-year with Hertz only. And now we're looking at maybe having additional players in the game and doing a different business model to get car sharing here. Our goal is to get car sharing in the city of Los Angeles. It is also to provide good customer service. It is also to really sort of look at how car share can augment parking management in the city. And so we would be coming back to you with recommendations about how the city should go forward with the car share program.
And on the permit system, we could do not just traditional car share, but sort of point-to-point.
Yes, so we're looking at point-to-point and what it would look like, what it would take to be able to administer that program, and all the specifics that would go along with that program, so that when we bring something back to you, you can make a decision about whether you want to move forward with it or not. Right. Our goal is to try to get some cars on the street. We're also surveying some cities who have point-to-point now. You might have heard of Hermosa Beach has it now. San Francisco has a pilot program. We're looking at that model as well to see how it would fit into what we want to do. So we need to do some research and background to come back to you, but today we wanted you to allow us to rescind the action before so that we can move forward.
And just to be very clear, because I want this to be in the record and in the committee report, I just want to confirm that LADOT sent a letter to Hertz in February of this year advising the city would be cutting off negotiations if Hertz failed to respond, and Hertz never responded. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Non-responsive.
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 Okay. Thank you. Colleagues?
Good plan, Dee.
All right. Without objection, we will forward this to council with an affirmative recommendation.
Thank you.
And that, folks, wraps it up. Thank you.
Well, I didn't get to answer my question. I did ride my bike a number of times, especially in a parade. Just to let you know, riding in a parade.
Mentioned that before you got here. Yeah. Although you refused to pop a wheelie at my request.